Welcome back. This week we're going to tie a classic Muddler Minnow. This is a Dawn Gapen pattern designed up on the Nipigon River in Ontario back in 1936. It's a good overall sculpin bait fish imitation. A lot of the design principles on this one carry over to a lot of the things that we're doing today. I'm going to start out with a Dairiki 710 size 4. I like the 4X long hooks a little bit better than I do the 3X, and it just gives you a little bit more room on your collar. I'll explain that a little bit further as I go on, but I'm going to just get a good thread base down. I'm going to leave probably a 1/4 of an inch, and you can see right there where I'm going to stop my thread. That's just going to tell me not to go any further with my thread, and that's going to be for the head on the deer hair and the collar. Take my thread back to the barb of the hook, and then I'm going to advance forward just a little bit. For our tail and our overwing on this one, we're going to use some mottled turkey. Down on the bottom portion right here is what we're going to use for the tail. This top portion, it's a little bit longer up here. This is going to go as our overwing. There's a little curve in this, and you'll see as I clip this off, you'll be able to see it a little bit better. It doesn't really matter which way you have your curve, whether it's going up or down. Whichever way you decide to tie it in, it'll be fine. If you want to tie it straight back and not even worry about the curve, which is what you'll wind up with after you get this thing wet, it won't have that straight out of the magazine look to it. But I'm going to take 2 equal widths on this, and you can see here's that curve that I was talking about. It has that slight slope going up. I'm going to tie these ones down, so this one's going to be toward the camera side, and then I'm just going to match this up with my other piece and make sure that my lengths are the same. A lot of the guys, a lot of the tires back in the early days would take and actually glue these down or glue these together to get that nice curved, really clean looking section on their feathers. A lot of the hair guys with the hackle stems that they would use for overwings, they would glue them. You can do it if you want. It's not really functionally not really that feasible to do it. So I'm going to measure this out just shy of my overall length of the hook. It's probably going to be about the same length that I have my thread, and then I'm going to follow that curve back on the hook, and this is what I'm going to tie in. This is going to be my tail with that downward slope on the feathers. Your first couple of wraps on this, make them really loose because we're tying on a hook that's rounded. Well, all of our hooks are rounded, honestly. But because you're tying a flat material on a rounded hook, it has a tendency, if you really pull on it, to want to rotate a little bit, and that curve will disappear from you really quick. There you can see I have it. I keep the vise canted to me. If you've watched any of the other videos, I like when the vise is, I'm looking more flat at the hook instead of directly over top of it. So there's the flat look that you would typically see. But I'm going to have this turned a little bit, as always, and then I'm just going to work this back. Don't go getting crazy and really tightening this down. As you start working your way forward, then by all means go ahead and tighten it up a little bit, and there you have it. You got that nice little curve. There's your tail. And before I advance up any further on this, I'm going to take about 2 more. Go up just a little bit further. I'm going to tie in some gold wire, and I got too much of it here. It's going to be all over the place. It's going to be all over the place. But I'm just going to tie in this gold wire, work my way to the back, get this secured, and then I'm going to cover up this turkey just for a little bit of help with the taper. Just going to work this through, try and keep this on the top side of the hook. Not that that matters a ton, but it will help with your overall look and shape on the body. But quite honestly, I mean, the underneath is the only side that's really seen on this body. So we'll go right back to where we left off with our thread before, stopping there yet again, and then I'm going to go back and tie in. This is just gold and silver tinsel. I'm going to tie this in with the silver side down, and I'm going to clip this little excess off right here. That way I'm not getting too far ahead of myself. And I'm going to half hitch, use the rotary function. If you don't have the rotary, you'll wind up having to go with the, just winding this by hand. And if that's the case, obviously don't use that much material. It'll just be a long-winded wind all the way back. So I'm going to just touch this up with a little bit of glue. Kind of spread this out a little bit and have everything looking pretty smooth. And then I'm just going to work my way back with my gold. I'm not getting too concerned about making perfect wraps, one right on top of the other, because I'm coming back through on this with a second wrap right over top, and this is going to cover up any gaps that you do have. I'm going to stop that just short of my thread. Try not to throw a ton of glue all over the bench. Looks like we succeeded. And I'm going to tie this off, and just for a little bit of extra added security, you really don't need to do this if you glue your thread base before you wrap your tinsel. But, oh boy, I got a pile of this here. I'm just going to take and counter wrap now with this small gold wire. I'm going to take that right up to the top, and this is just a little bit of extra security, Like I said, it's not really necessary if you're gluing, but just in case, a tooth gets in there or something, it won't rip up the body and fray all over the place. So I'm going to work a little bit of a thread base down again, keeping everything behind where I want to start my collar and my deer hair head. This is just going to act as a prop. This is just regular gray squirrel tail. You can stack this if you want. I really don't. I typically don't stack this stuff. I just pick out a little clump here. Don't go getting a ton of it, and I'll give you a good measurement here once I get this clipped off. So you don't need a ton of this. Like I was saying, this is just really a prop for your overwing. If you go getting too heavy on this, I'm going to clean this out, get rid of any of the shorter hairs that are in there. But if you go getting too heavy on this, you're going to wind up with a big bump right here. Your overwing's going to fall all over the place. It's not going to act how it's supposed to. And then with your deer hair as well, it'll wind up being a little more difficult to get a nice clean cut on that head or a nice clean stack. So I'm going to take this back probably an 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch past where my tail is tied in, and with non-compressible hair we're going to trim this. Scissors are getting dull. We're going to trim this at an angle. Get rid of all that junk there. Give my thread a quick spin, and we'll get this tied in. Now, as I get to the back to where I have every hair in that bundle in there, I can really go ahead and wrench down on this, really secure my stuff into place. And you can see it gives us that nice little prop to where when we put this overwing in, it'll stay up for us a little bit better. So the same thing with this one. Go ahead and measure out the same width. Get 2 pieces of this. And you can see that nice curve again that we were talking about. There it is. For this one, I'm going to stand this one up for no other reason than to just be a little bit different. It'll give you a little contrast. But it really makes no difference as to what the fly does or how it acts in the water. So I'm going to take this one back just past the tips on that squirrel tail. And same thing with this. Your first couple of wraps, nice and loose. Get these nice and loose through here. Go ahead and fill this out. Get a couple of good wraps in there. And then I'm just going to give a little bit of tension to that. Just a little bit, and you're able to see that quill or that turkey is sitting right on that squirrel, nice and clean. It's not going to go straight back. It's going to give you a little bit of an angle. It's a little bit covered up here. I can move this around and everything, but in all honesty, it's not going to make a huge difference as soon as we go getting this collar in. Now, what I will explain on this head, this is what I do different than a lot of the stuff that you'll see tied commercially. I tend to lean more toward the cougar style, or the woolly sculpin, whatever that may be. I just like the way that tracks in the water better. This is what you see a lot of nowadays. The original wasn't done like this. You see this really tight compressed deer hair. What this does is it traps water, or it doesn't trap water. So it really makes it tough to bust through the surface of the film and get this fly where you need it. This is going to repel a lot of water, and it's not going to let stuff get in there and allow the fly to sink as well as what you're going to see with the original. I mean, it was a little bit more block-headed. This one's going to be more, like I said, cougar style or whatever it may be. And this is just a little bit tougher to fish, in my opinion. You'll see a lot of these bullet styles tied. I just think they're a little tougher, and they don't quite give the profile that you're after for the sculpin or minnow, whatever it may be. So with this deer hair, I'm going to do this just like a cougar. I'm not going to have near as much on the collar, and there's reasons for that, which I'll explain as we go through it. But I'm just going to clean this stuff out real quick. I got this in my comb, getting all the all the fuzz and all the excess out of there. That's just not going to allow you to have a nice clean deer hair head. And we'll go ahead and throw this in the stacker. Look at this. Clean this up, have these nice and stacked, nice and even. And I'm going to stop this, when I measure this out, I'm going to stop this collar right at the point of my hook. So if I take a line straight up, that's where I want my collar stopping, right there. If you go getting too far back, it takes away from the body, and then it looks like the entire fly is all collar and head, and it just looks out of place, quite honestly. So keep these a little bit shorter. Same thing, I'm going to clip this off. When the original was done, well, I don't know for certain on the original on this one, but a lot of the stuff that you see tied now, they'll tie a collar in on this side and a collar in on the camera side. And what that does is it just keeps this squirrel and the turkey from moving around on you too much, and it makes that look a lot neater. I'm not too worried about how neat that stuff looks, how clean it looks. I'm looking for functionality on this collar. So there we go. I'm just going to throw that in, pinch this real quick, and you can see as I turn this underneath, we have that nice half moon that we look for, as always with the zoo cougars, with the woolly sculpins, the twin tails, any of that stuff, the dungeons. This just it tracks so much better in the water. It's so much more functional, so I tend to do stuff like that, even with these older patterns when I know they were designed a different way. So whichever way you want to tie them, it's up to you, but I think this does fish a lot better. And then the last thing I'm going to do on this is I'm just going to spin one stack of deer hair. I'm not going to pack this head. It's just one stack. I'm going to brush it out, I'm going to trim it, and it's done. So I got my deer hair cleaned out, everything's nice and clean. Went through the comb a couple of times. I'm going to trim all of these tips off. Those tips, they're non-compressible. This stuff's hollow. It's going to be good to work with. It's going to be easy to work with. So find your center point on this, line this up, and we're just going to do one quick spin. So we're going to go 1, 2, get a third on there, pinch your collar, pull this down, and there you go. You got your nice spin. Your collar hasn't shifted on you, it hasn't rotated, everything's clean. Now, like I said, don't pack this stuff back to where it's so tight that you have to, you take a packer or whatever it is, where I have one here, to where you're taking this back and you're just forcing stack after stack of hair on there. This is going to work just fine, and it's going to give you the profile that you need. It's going to sink a lot better because we don't have a ton of hair on here. The water's going to be able to get in between every individual fiber and allow it to sink. So give this a quick whip finish. Now, depending on what you're mainly trying to imitate, if you're doing a sculpin, get the broader, wider head, flat on the bottom. If you want to do an overall minnow, go ahead and round it a little bit more. We're going to go with the sculpin on this one. We're going to keep the head a little bit wider. So I'm just going to stabilize my hand here, and I'm going to draw my razor blade right through this, giving this a nice flat trim on the bottom. My blade's starting to get a little beat up on me here. It's not trimming quite as good as it should. So there we go. We got that nice clean underneath side here. You can see that's nice and flat. Didn't take a ton of time trimming this up. And then I'm just going to go right in the front here. I'm going to push this right through. I'm looking for a little bit broader of a profile on this, more so a sculpin imitation. I'm just pushing right through this real quick, and I'm just going to make a couple of minor trims on this. Make sure that I have everything pretty even, and I got one section underneath here that I just don't like too much. But overall, that's what we're after. I'll trim this up and clean it up a little bit more before I take the picture on it. But there you can see, there is the Muddler Minnow. Got a little bit longer on the side that's closer to me. I'll get those trimmed up, take it out of the vise, and make it look a little bit cleaner, and it'll wind up swimming a lot like a cougar, actually. But there it is, with a few modifications from the original and stepping away from the commercially tied designs these days. There is the Muddler Minnow. If you guys have any questions, comments on this one, leave them with me and I'll get back to you. But thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you next week.